something I learned there. If you can hear me, clap once. If you can hear me, clap twice. Hear me, clap 3 times. Thank you. Now, we've got our next panel for the afternoon. And this panel is looking at sparking creative expression for adults on the spectrum and ideas for libraries. And we have 4 people on the panel, and I'll try to introduce them in order. Starting at my furthest right is Donald Cohen. Donald is Colin's father, who I'll introduce in a moment. He's his agent and his biggest fan. In his day job, he's the founder and executive director of In the Public Interest, a national research and policy center, privatization of public goods and responsible contracting. He's currently on the board of the Ballot Initiative Strategy Center. His opinion pieces and articles have appeared in the New York Times, Reuters, the LA Times, San Diego Union Tribune, New York Daily News, the New Republic, the American Prospect, The Nation, and other online and print outlets. Next to Donald is Colin Eldred-Cohen. He's a creative writer and storyteller on the autism spectrum. Born in San Diego and graduated from the San Diego School for Creative and Performing Arts, where he discovered his talents for performance, singing, and Irish dance. He graduated from UC Santa Cruz with a degree in film. He currently lives in San Jose, where he writes regularly for fishandcherries.com, and has just published his first illustrated children's book, The Fire Truck Who Got Lost. It can be purchased at the Art of Autism online store, and he's available for interviews and readings. He's also published articles and reviews on Culture, which is spelled CULTJER.com, The Art of Autism, Geek Club Books, Culture spelled the normal way, Sonar.com, and Fanbasepress.com. Next to Colin is Anlor, Davin, and she grew up in a small town on the western coast of France. From her earliest childhood, she was beset by overwhelming sensory chaos and had trouble navigating the social world. Only many years later did she learn that she was autistic. She's navigated a number of challenges throughout her life and achieved numerous successes. Her book, Being Seen, is a memoir about an autistic woman struggling not only to be seen, but to be understood and respected. Today, she works to help people understand her experiences with autism and to learn how basic meditative practice helps one live and thrive with autism. And at this end of the table is Gregory Yates. Gregory's the co-founder and co-chair of the San Francisco-based nonprofit Ascend, AASCEND.org, the Autism Asperger's Spectrum Coalition for Education, Networking, and Development. Ascend is one of America's oldest nonprofits devoted specifically to the needs of adults on the autism spectrum. The organization pioneered collaboration between autistic adults, family members, and professionals who work with them. Ascend conducts regularly monthly meetings, social events, biennial conferences on adult autism, and it has a thriving job club, cable TV show, and other programs. So welcome our panel, and it's going to be an interesting hour and 3/4.
Well, thank you. Thank you to the people who put together this conference, because without that, the word about autism would not spread. And also thank you to all of you for being here for the same reason. We're all in it together. Thank you. We're going to talk about, I am going to talk about how, in my personal experience, has autism impacted my creative process, which I take to be, for me, the main one is really writing my book, Being Seen. how did my autism impact this? Well, I only wrote the book once I was formally diagnosed. Before that, I could not. I did not have the space to have any creative, for me. And as I was saying, recently there are spikes I feel in my life as an autistic person. There has been times where my autism is really, call it, catching up with me. And so I wrote my book when I just started to get better from my latest big spike. One was as a teenager, the first one I'd said, and then in my late 30s and 40s. So I was formally diagnosed at age 46, which means now it has been 7 years. Oh, should I keep going with my whole thing? Well, stop me when you... Yeah. Okay. So the other, I'm just going by whatever questions I was kind of asked. What factors have presented the greatest obstacles to achieving your vocational goals? And I'm going to be very short on that one because there is a big one, which was that I had to struggle to survive always. I was a single mother, and my son is now 25. Do you want to talk, Greg? No. What environment and or supports have provided the greatest positive influence in your life or your creative process? Well, for me, the greatest positive influence, the one that has completely changed my life and that makes me be able to be here, is my Zen practice. I have been practicing for the past 17 years, and it's meditation, Zazen. I don't know if you guys know about it, but for me, this is it. I feel like my practice is what brings my life back on track. I mean, it's very indirect. Okay? It's not like, oh, I sit and boom. No. But obviously things became, I'm here, you know. And I am much happier. So my Zen practice, I don't know how much I can say that. Okay, let's mix it up.
Is it on? I can't. Yeah, it's on. So hello everyone. As the nice man introducing us said, I am Colin, and he pretty much went through my entire opening paragraph. But yeah, no, I've been creating and writing stories since I can remember, and I would actually like to tell you about my path as a writer and what it means to be on the spectrum for me. For starters, it meant I was not a patient person for the longest time, and well, let's face it, that comes hand in hand with being on the spectrum. I mean, I knew I had Asperger's syndrome since elementary school at the latest, but I don't think I knew what it meant until high school. I knew that I had to take some pills, and I went to a speech therapy class, but when high school and middle school came around and I had to use a typing device because I couldn't take notes as fast, or I had to take my tests in a separate room, I think that sort of really set things in that I was different. Not dumb, just, you know, it takes a bit of a harder time to process. Stuff goes into me fine, it just doesn't always have the best time coming out. Now, it's not all negative. I'm sure many of you know it's not all negative. Asperger's syndrome has actually allowed me to keep track of my many, many, many stories and take inspiration from literally anywhere. Books, TVs, movies. even the numerous theater, choir, or dance productions I've been in over the years. And as the man said, I went to the School for Creative and Performing Arts, and that's what helped shape my creative mind. It's where I learned acting, filmmaking, proper singing, and so much more that just boiled together to make, well, me. But things don't get interesting until a few years ago, where I started to take writing more seriously. I wrote for Fish and Cherries regularly. I started doing movie reviews called Real Snippets, and even pushed myself to go see movies that I normally wouldn't, just so I could keep doing things weekly. I did some short fiction, some articles, which was a great way to build up diligence and structure. And eventually I got to the point where I was basically self-employed, but with a paycheck, government grants and all that, and had to govern myself. It wasn't always easy. So to stay focused and productive, I got help from calling my dad for advice, reassurance, or just hearing a familiar voice. Change of scenery. For example, the Martin Luther King Jr. Library in San Jose was a great place. Starbucks, a juice bar, just something to get out of my house. And of course, I had a writing coach, Gigi. She helped me create structure. We did a daily calendar and a check-in. And I think that's kind of when I started learning that to be a creative person, you really need a team. But the next big step was, of course, the fire truck who got lost. One night some years ago, I was settling down, small studio apartment in downtown San Jose, and then my mom called with my nephew Atticus, who she was babysitting, and he wanted to hear a story from me. I do not have kids. It's been far too long since I read a children's book enough for me to memorize it, so I just pulled together I just improv'd a story about a little fire truck named Barnabas on the spot. And a few days later, after some talks, I decided, yeah, this probably has potential. So I wrote it down. I got my friend Amber to do the art because I knew her from college and I knew that she's one of the best artists I know. My dad and I found someone named Gordy Grundy on Craigslist to help construct the book, and then we took to Indiegogo to raise funds for the book. My stepbrother Armando helped me make the promotional video. Everyone helped me stay on track, and the goal was $2,000, and we made triple that, which still blows me away. Now, before you guys start thinking this is a fairy tale story where everything works out magically, no. There were so many roadblocks. And Amber needed to move to a different location. Our intended format wasn't supported by our self-publishing method. That we needed to switch to digital because Amber didn't have the space or time to do hand-drawn stuff. And on top of that, there was, Asperger's syndrome and anxiety problems. I was overanalyzing everything. It changed to the plan, didn't happen easily. And, there were times when I felt like I was all this public attention was right on me. So I just wanted to curl up in a ball in the closet and wait for everything to pass. But it did come together. Book hit shelves in October, and last I checked, sold 446 copies. And in fact, the San Jose Library bought 50 books, 2 for each of their branches. And yeah, that's the short version of how I wound up here. I wrote a book, everyone I've shown it to has loved it, except for the crazy person that emailed me a very incoherent mess about how using who for an inanimate object like a fire truck was socially unacceptable. And so for March, I've actually been doing readings at local libraries and preschool and would love to do more in the future. I've got sort of this relationship going on with the San Jose Public Library. Grew up in San Diego, I don't live there anymore. And in fact, they helped me find a job in the Santa Clara County Office of Education. They scheduled readings on library branches, and I am going to volunteer in the very near future, we're setting it up right now, to lead groups of teenagers in Dungeons and Dragons campaigns in one of the branches. So, apart from that, what's next? Well, a lot of people have asked me if there's more to Barnabas. They want to read more. I'm getting some requests, but short answer, yes. But I do have other ideas I want to do. I've got an idea for a children's book about owls and pumpkins that could be fun to break out in the autumn time. Another's more adult book about people on the planet Earth suddenly gaining superpowers and how they and the world adjust to this. But I do know that a lot of my works will promote and focus on neurodiversity, which I also want to advocate for in real life. Fish and Cherries will continue to update, and eventually I hope to use Fish and Cherries to be an actual production company, produce movies and short films that the public at large can see. So I'm never going to stop writing. And let me wrap up my bit with a shameless bit of self-promotion. If any of you guys have ideas where I could do readings for my book, where I can sell them, or how I can advocate through writing, let me know. You can talk to my dad, this old Sasquatch. In fact, let's have him talk now. Thank you.
I have to say same here for my book.
Absolutely, I've read some. I have read both of their books, and Anlor's, and both of the books are on the table as samples. Anlor's book, Being Seen, is really fabulous. Colin's is too. Here's that. So let me tell you a little bit about. So I'm the dad. About my path to help Colin to where he is today. So that's. So I'm going to sort of go through that. In high school, in college, I was sort of a presence. In terms of helping, keeping him on focus and all that. After college, I helped him get a job in San Jose with friends who ran a nonprofit, sort of administrative jobs. Did that for a year or two. Then what I came to believe, and we had never been involved in the autism community. We did it since he was young, on our own. But what I came to believe, reading a gazillion books, is that he will be happy in life, and we will get the benefit of his brilliance if he can be in the world and sort of pursue his own passion and his own skill set. He really is a fabulous writer. So I figured we should give writing a go. Let's give it a go. Raise some money, hired a writing coach. I gave him a URL for one birthday present for Fish and Cherries, and then my stepdaughter, his stepsister, created a Facebook page, a website, so he could start posting, so he had a presence online. So, and then, he was writing regularly. So that's next steps. The next step is I realized, and my experience in life and my job, I'm really an organizer. That's kind of what I've been doing for my whole adult life. So I've created several organizations. I've run political campaigns, when the executive function disability that Colin has, I am my disability is that I am the exact opposite. I am horribly organized. I mean, I'm organized hyperly, is what I meant to say. It can be maddening. So, but I realized that writers writers, no matter neurotypical or on the spectrum, it's a hard life. It's the gig economy. It's it's gig to gig. It's you're constantly hustling for yourself. It's true of musicians. It's true of artists. It's true of all sort of people who are creatives. So I started to think about whether there was some way to create a program that helped creatives on the spectrum, because when I, researching, I found programs like Specialistern, is how you say, into the tech community. And Colin lives in the Silicon Valley, so there's lots of tech, but what about creatives? So, could we create something for writers, for artists, and all that? And really all I did at that point is I started making calls, two sets of calls. First is I wanted to understand the creative industries, certainly starting from what Colin was interested in. Comic books, film, fiction. And I would do cold calls to publishers and comic book houses and Google a lot. The point being is to try to understand the what the employer needs are. It's really from a workforce development perspective, because I had done work on workforce development a number of years ago, and what the potential occupational paths were. I just sort of talked to as many people I can who did workforce development, who worked for WIBs, workforce investment boards, in those industries. Anybody can get in to talk to. So the second thing was just to start a network, find others. And I found Mike Bernick, whose son is on the spectrum, who wrote the book about Ascend, called The Job Club, that Greg will talk about. They invited me to Ascend. I live in LA, but they invited me to Ascend, and it was just an idea to lead a conversation about because there are a number of people in Ascend. Anlor, there's several musicians, there's some fabulous artists that go to Ascend, Hero and others. We're all having the same challenges. And musicians, how do you kind of make it as a creative person in this world? It's tough in any sense. We came up with this idea of the Autism Creatives Collective at that meeting. And the idea was to try to help bring people together and create a program. It hasn't gone so well, so I'm going to leave that part for later. Because there are real challenges that I think are instructive. Just the next piece, in terms of fire truck. Once we got fire truck moved, the book moving, my role was several. One is to push to make it happen, to help keep it on task, push to make it happen, get all this. There's a lot of steps to do that. After it, we published, self-published. Emails to everybody I know. I have thousands of email addresses for all my work. I emailed constantly to folks. I made phone calls to everybody I could find. I emailed every autism organization. The book is not about autism, but we mentioned Colin's autism spectrum, and it is published by the Autism Creatives Collective technically. So we try to market, what I would call guerrilla marketing everywhere I could. And in fact, that's how I'm here. That's why we're here, because that was a cold email to Targeting Autism. I hear there may be because of libraries. There was a connection to libraries. I'm looking for firefighting unions to connect to, and I'm looking to other folks on the spectrum. So how do you get out to the world? Everyone knows people with kids. So we ended up creating, as Colin mentioned, this partnership with the San Jose Public Library, because Googling found that they did story times. Did a cold email to the early education coordinator at the library. We set up a call. I flew up. We had a meeting with the four of us. They kind of embraced and adopted Colin. It wasn't just the library. It was also a program out of the County Office of Ed called the Inclusion Collaborative that brings together agencies and school districts in San Jose to promote inclusion in the region. So there's libraries, and Colin has spoken to that group as well. And that, in fact, is what led to Colin's job as a paraeducator for the school district in a high school. So the bottom line is that network. I mean, I just make calls to anybody. Let me just end with a couple of other things, lessons. As a parent, I'm sure you've heard these stories many times, I struggled a lot, always, and I continue to struggle with how hard to push and how much to step back, and how much to let it happen. I still struggle with it. I definitely don't always get it right. But Colin lets me know, clearly. What's that? I'm sorry. Because I'm a parent? Parents do it. That's right, parents do that. So I am not a helicopter, I am a low-flying drone. What I've tried to do is create what I call a no-judgment zone, right, for Colin. Everything and anything is okay. I'm the safe space. You could say anything is screwed up, feel screwed up, anything. I try to teach and all that, but I'm a no-judgment zone is key. The last thing I'll say about libraries, and I'll say it now with no more questions, is there really are lots of opportunities. We've learned from the San Jose Public Library, for people on the spectrum who are authors and creative and musicians and artists and who lead role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, to bring people on the spectrum into libraries, to bring participants as volunteers, possibly as staff certainly, but as volunteers. I joined the board of the Art of Autism, which is another small organization based in California, mostly focused on visual arts, but writing as well. Has a great website and trying to get folks on the spectrum who have creative skills out. I'm also connected up with Geek Club Books that was mentioned earlier, that do trainings that a couple of people on the spectrum who go into classrooms mostly in Northern California to teach both about autism, but who are also just storytellers in classrooms and community organizations around there. And what I believe is true is, there's lots of little organizations like this, and you may know many of them yourself, but there's lots of organizations, virtually every one of them started by a parent on the spectrum, who are trying to create opportunities for their kids or for their family members, but who are incredibly creative. They're writers, they're authors, they're musicians, they're craft makers, they're all sorts of folks that it would be fabulous if there were ways to strengthen that relationship and bring those folks in to be part of the library community.
Hello? Yeah. So I'm Greg Yates, and my head is kind of spinning here, and I'm not sure where to begin because there's two things I want to talk about. One is, first of all, I'm Anlor's partner. We live together, and I'm here partly to support her. But I also do have creative projects and have been a creative person all my life in one form or another. And my creative work is deeply connected to my autism. But the reason my head is spinning is that every time I come to one of these conferences, and I've been to a lot of them, I think about the kind of autism that runs in my family. Now, you may have heard me ask Michael John Carley a question earlier about the gifted and talented autistic people. And that really is the story of my family. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about my family's story because it's deeply connected with a very creative family. So I'll talk about my uncle. My uncle is my mother's brother, and he was we now know, very autistic. And he was one of the first engineers in Silicon Valley. He was an early engineer for Hewlett-Packard, and Hewlett-Packard was the first Silicon Valley company. So he was kind of present at the creation down there. So he was a little bit of a poster boy for autism employment in tech. And he was very able from a tech point of view. And he was as crippled socially as anyone I've ever met. There's a problem in that if you are intellectually very able, people assume that you don't have a problem. And I've run up against this myself. I have been so socially unable in my life that in order to feel good about myself, I used my intellect, not only to try to decode other people's social behavior, and I'm pretty good at that. I can analyze novels and things like that now. I can figure out what characters are doing, all of that stuff by using my intellect. But also I used my intellect to feel good about myself. I really wanted to relate socially to people, and I was outside and outside and outside. I always felt like that person sort of standing outside in the snow, looking in through a window at a warm party with all the lights and the fire going, and I'm out here. That was my experience, and to a large extent, it still is. So I used my intellect to medicate my loneliness, I did really well academically, especially in STEM-related subjects. I want to say a word on that, by the way. I'm a real STEM kind of guy who was ultimately made it into a PhD program at MIT before autism finally caught up with me. That was in psychology and brain science. But I feel emphatically that I'm an emphatic believer in liberal arts education. I just rubs me the wrong way to see education going on towards STEM subjects at the expense of the arts and the humanities. That's just me standing on a soapbox here. I just feel that as an autistic person who is a very STEM-related person, hey, I need compensatory education in the humanities. I need that stuff. Yeah, I can go real strong in STEM stuff, and I've done that. But I would say that the subjects that really helped move me the most were closer to the humanities, precisely because I was so bad at them. It's where I was learning stuff that didn't come to me naturally. Anyway, so much for that. So yeah, I did really well on tests, and when I got A's, I felt great. It made up for the fact that I was socially not there, out of it. So I come from a family of academics. Actually, 3 generations of academic scientists and physicians precede me in my family. So it's a long pedigree of academics. And in that family, autistic traits didn't look so strange. I think it might have been Hans Asperger himself described autistic people as little professors. And in a world of big professors, a little professor just kind of looks sort of normal. So I was another one of those little professors. I was hyperlexic, if anything, related to adults, not to my peers, to the extent I related to anyone. And mercifully, I had 2 neurotypical brothers, and I was able to tag along on their social ability. They were younger, so it was a little bit embarrassing for me to be the older brother tagging along on my younger brother's worlds, but thank God for them, for that. I'm so grateful, and I was blessed in that way. But we were a family, if you meet me, you'll see I seem to be very articulate. I've learned how to look you in the eye, although it's very painful to me. I can do that. But I'm the most aloof person I know. I am constantly heading for the exits. I want to be near an exit. Just being around other people is difficult for me, in spite of the fact that I want to relate socially. It does help me. I'm extremely grateful that there's a quiet room here. I'll say that again. I'm really happy about that quiet room. I've been using it heavily. I do much better with a lot of sensory issues lowered down, sound. And it's funny about that. People on the spectrum are very different about sensory issues. And it's interesting how different kinds of sound, for example, will trigger people on the spectrum. For me, it's little things like a ticking clock or a compressor motor or something coming through the wall, a low rumble coming through the wall of some kind. For other people, it's loud things that are particularly bad. Now, I don't like loud sounds, but they are not nearly as bad for me as a ticking clock. In fact, if I go, there's a place that we sometimes meditate together, and when I go there, the first thing I do is I get up and I take the clock off the wall and cart it into another room, because I can hear that tick all the way across the room. And what happens is that my nervous system just orients towards small sounds. I think I'm wired to survive in an area where you need to hear small sounds in order to survive. Anyway, I've got it. Okay, so creative process. My family, obviously from a long line of academics and physicians, there's a lot of creative energy there in the family, and the style in my family was, the style in my, we okay? That's the time we're looking at, right? So we got plenty of time here. Yeah, that's why I'm carrying on, because I can see that clock. Oh, really? It stopped going? Okay, well, anyway, we got plenty of time. I'll carry on. I'm feeling kind of passionate about this at the moment. I'm very aloof, and my family is basically pretty aloof. What we tended to do was parallel play. And I actually feel very comfortable today in parallel play. If I'm around other people, we worked on projects to get to the point. We each had our own individual creative projects, and we did all kinds of things, but they would all be individual little things. So I did things like I built a hang glider back when before they got all hip. I mean, I found plans in a book from the 1800s and built this hang glider out of spruce and muslin and piano wire, the old style hang glider. I taught myself electronics and became a radio amateur at an early age. Things like that. And I was always from an early age onward, very interested in brains. That started from another project when I was first or second grade. I got an erector set. I really love erector sets. I don't know if you know what they are. They're like little metal panels with screws and bolts. Oh God, I love that thing. Anyway, I built a robot, and the robot just stood there. He looked really cool, but he just stood there, and I said, this robot needs a brain, and that was the beginning of my interest in, robot brains. That was a lot of years ago. Anyway, so that's the pattern in my family, a lot of creativity, a lot of sort of parallel play, individual projects, and things of that sort. And me being socially disconnected from most people, and medicating my feelings of inadequacy with good grades. All right, let me just look at it. So how does autism factor into my creative process? The thing I notice about the autism in my family is we are willing to entertain ideas that are outside the range of what's socially acceptable. We're not inhibited by social signals about what you can or can't think about. We are very broad thinkers in my family. That's a feature of my autism. I am not sensitive to social constraints of that kind. I tend to be very well behaved in public. I don't throw obvious tantrums. Internally I may be having one, but externally I don't usually. But as far as I was not ever drawn to kind of do the mainstream thing with your mind, right? That's not the approach that was encouraged in my family or that came naturally to anyone in my family. My father was a research scientist, an MD who gave out PhDs is basically what he was. And he had that same problem himself, that his own career, which involved theoretical work in biology, was very original and outside of the mainstream. Now, he had major university appointments and so on. He did fine professionally. But the point is, the fruit doesn't fall very far from the tree. My father both my parents have strong autistic traits. And my father actually is one of the most, he monologues more than most people I know. But he parlayed it into a profession. A professor, he would stand up on a podium and monologue, but he would do it over the dinner table as well. Eventually, as we got older, he came to sort of acknowledge that he was a bit on the spectrum, and he said, well, you've got to admit I'm pretty high functioning. He was a professor. Okay, so so that's one of the main, I would say that's the main way I see, that's one way that autism has affected my creative process, just willingness to go anywhere that my mind takes me. Another way, let's see, perseveration. You put me on a subject and I will stick with it. I'll stick with it for years. And I've stuck with this brain problem for years. It's what ended me up at MIT. So I'd say those are kind of the two main things. Extremely open mind about intellectual subjects and stick-to-itiveness, perseveration / perseverance. I'm looking at the questions here, so I want to make sure I get the questions here. So the questions that we receive are relative to vocational goals. Because I'm so aloof and such an outsider, I was never really very interested. Vocational was always secondary. The idea of making a living was always secondary. For me, it was like pursuing my perseverative interest was primary. So I just did that, and maybe this is an area where my autism is central. Again, I've never cared that much about having a lot of money. I was homeless for a period of time. For 10 years, I lived in a basement closet. And I didn't feel deprived when I was doing that because I was pursuing my interests. I'm going to stop around now, except I just want to say that I have more to say, because I want to talk about my specific project, but I want to open it up to some of the others on the panel as well. I'm glad I have an opportunity. Just want to give you guys a flavor of this piece of the autism spectrum here, a piece that I don't hear much about. I'm also kind of reaching out to you, because I said my head is spinning a little bit. I realize that I may be kind of the point man for this. I ask around, is there anybody who's studying autism in the gifted and talented community? And I've been getting blanks back from that. So I think I am co-running a long-run successful autism organization in San Francisco, ascend.org. So, I know what it is to take on a job like this. Maybe this is my job. One of the things I need to do is to be the point man for this exact problem. There are people who are being put into gifted and talented programs, and they are gifted and talented, and they're on the autism spectrum and can use primarily social supports, which means, learning social basics, which means reliving childhood play experiences which they may not have experienced as they were. Well, it can mean a lot of different things. It means learning to control the environment so that they can relate socially, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I feel like I'm saying this all out loud because one or more of you in here is going to run across somebody else who's thinking about similar things, and you can always reach me. The easiest way to reach me, although I'm not speaking for Ascend today, I'm speaking for myself, but the easiest way to reach me is there's a contact form on the ascend.org website, or just email info@ascend.org, and I'm the first person who gets the email, so it will get to me. So I want to say something about supports, though. My mother actually taught me a lot. She was I make my living now, by the way, as a handyman, which is great. Michael John Carley talked about encouraging kids to take up the trades earlier. Whoa, trades were my saving because I am so intellectual that I will be off in my mind. But if I work as a handyman, first of all, it is not repetitive at all. I'm one of those autistic people who does not like repetitive work. I like a new challenge every day. But it's very physical, and it pulls me out of my mind, out of my intellect for enough time. It gives me a breather, which is intellectually helpful to me as well. And it also, I can regulate my social interaction as a handyman. I can either interact with my clients or not, depending on my mood. So that's very helpful to me as a person on the spectrum. Anyway, but as far as the main support, my mother taught me my mechanical skills. She did things like take toasters apart with me and put them back together again. But my father took me under his wing, and I got a lot of my scientific training from my father. So he would drag me into the lab, and he knew I had my intellectual ability. Frankly, he knew I was smarter than he was, and he put me on to difficult problems. So I did computer programming around research subjects for him. I helped him co-edit a book on self-organizing systems that came out of a conference, and so on. So that was really, really helpful to me, and I love my father for having let me do that. So I was able to be very encouraged in what abilities I had. Okay, I've yacked enough for now. I appreciate you listening to what I have to say, and it's great being here, and I'll just pass it on to
Yeah, so I'll carry on. But I just wanted to say again, I reiterate about Zen practice, and I want to say that I started 6 months ago to facilitate a meditation group for people on the autism and neurodiverse spectrum, and that this is once a month happening. We're all in California here, so there's a website for this. It's called autsit.net, autsit.net. I have a website for my book too. That's Davin.com. It's different. So, back to the questions. Another question that was asked is there anything that you would like to say to those who have underestimated your abilities? This is a really personal question for me. It's important to me. because I bet it happens all the time. Many people, they see me and they think, oh, my child is not like that. Well, actually, my mom never thought I would amount to anything. And let's have faith and let's, give opportunities. This morning we heard also the same word. Let's just give the child a lot of opportunities. In a way, I would say that when I was a child in France, I was not yet diagnosed. And at that time, and maybe especially in France, even though they're catching up big time, it was my saving grace not to be diagnosed. I'm going to say that. I know, it sounds very strange. But I was given opportunities that way. Nobody put me down. I could keep going. It's tough if you are going to go to an interview and disclosing, well, you never know. It's getting better and better. The word is coming out. But I know for myself that I never wanted to, I always wanted to try to appear, normal, whatever. So, that was for that question. Another one is, have you been successful in dealing with anxiety? Well, I wrote, I have not. As I write in my book, and actually this is borrowed partially from the words of Temple Grandin, I am in a perpetual state of, now I say nervousness, she says anxiety. But I personally like the word nervousness, and I talk about this in my book too, because to me, that's more like giving the message that it's out of my control. It's really, deeply in me, the nervous system. And what's better nowadays is obviously I'm older and I don't give in to it as much as I used to. But most of all, I'm saying it again, my Zen practice is what helps me tremendously with it. Then the last one for me, well actually two more. What is the quality or qualities that you would most like others to know about you? And I always come back to that. It's my most important is to share about meditation for all of us, not just autistic people. It's really what helps the most. I find the shortcut to everything to me. What do you consider to be the most important career advice that you would give to young creative people on the spectrum? Well, I think we've seen an array of everything. I saw whatever is coming to your way or whatever you like. What I want to say is don't be too easily discouraged. That's from my experience. Stick through difficult times. I found that I don't think I stayed with a job more than a year and a half ever. It's not that I was necessarily fired. I was never fired, but sometimes, yes, I was a teacher and, they thought I was strange, probably, I don't know. But I know that many times I just could not stand it any longer. The pressure, communication, that word was so important, communication. And then how can libraries play a supportive role to creative people of the spectrum? Well, I know that for me it was the public library that helped me find out about autism. I mean, it's the public library where I read a lot. I know we hear about this a lot, that a lot of us read, maybe some do not, I don't know. And still nowadays, public free libraries are where I get 95% of all I read. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Hold on. Oh, no. It's going to be a bit of a tough act to follow. I don't think my extra stuff is rooted in very much personal struggle, though as a writer, it's actually really, well, a lot of things are kind of difficult. Apart from the fact that I don't know how much my book has actually sold, I have to go through a third party to get that information. There's also the fact that I have so many stories just built up in here, it's really hard to get them all out on paper. And in general, it's actually really hard to sit down and write. I mean, I know it sounds like an easy problem to fix, but there's always like something. It's very difficult to self-govern yourself, even with practice. Not to mention, after about 6 hours of dealing with high school students with many, many different emotional problems, when I get home, I feel drained. It's really hard to work up and say, okay, I'm gonna write more of my story, this review that I've been sitting on for a while. I mean, I'm 4 reviews behind, so yeah, that should tell you how I've been dealing with stuff as of the moment. Also on top of that, it's very easy to fall to distractions, especially in your own house. That's why I'm grateful that the library and other places are like really awesome to be able to be put up in while I work on stuff. It doesn't fix the exhaustion problem because, you know, you gotta get yourself up and get to the library, but still, it's very calming. It's quiet, so you have nothing in between your thoughts and the paper, and it really just kind of is a good environment to really just center yourself in. I think libraries are a great place for people in the autistic community, people with autism, neurodiverse folks, and partly because of those reasons, if you know, I had any thoughts, I mean, maybe if the library had some like fidget gizmos or whatever, not just the spinny things with the ball bearings, but you know, like a slinky, twisty thing, any of those other stuff, like, yeah, like that. Actually, I was sitting through a, yes? Sorry? I have not. I've seen them, but I've never tried them. Yeah, stuff like that. I mean, from personal experience, I was trapped in a boring orientation for 6 hours for my new job, and one of those twisty toys saved my sanity, so that was great of them to have that out. Now, granted, if libraries were to have those out for people who needed them, they also run the risk of those toys being absconded with, so, you know, that I don't know how to solve. But, yeah, no, other stuff. And other stuff like the D&D program I'm going to be working with, like some kind of group for them to, you know, for students, neurotypical or autistic or what have you, to be able to express themselves would be great. Even maybe another type of quiet room, though libraries are already the quieter room. I don't know. But yeah, no, that's And of course, if they really want to go into it, I don't know, like some kind of story fair, like ask children or something, or potential creatives to write some things down and submit them, and have a whole event based around that, and also some kind of workshop for figuring out how to build your creative momentum. I mean, for me, the advice I could give is find a team. Find someone who cheers you on. Find someone who gives you who gives you the straight facts, and find someone who pushes you. Try not to cross-contaminate the roles, though, because then it can be really confusing. And I think that's mostly it, though. One of the questions I have here is there anything I would like to say to those who have underestimated my abilities? And I'm getting there, Doug. But thank you. I did have a lot of naysayers growing up. I had a lot of people who thought I was stupid, slow, ugly. Pretty sure a group of kids, you decided together that I was the most likely candidate to shoot up the school, and other stuff. And to them, I have to say, in honor of the town that I'm in right now,
Springfield, where, it's the mystery of life. Which one is it? Let me add a few things. I want to tell a story about Colin. No, it's not a bad story. So this is about the stories in his head. So we used to go on spring break when he was in middle school, I think. We'd take a vacation. We were driving down parallel to the Grand Canyon on that road, and he was working on a story that called Dimension Wars in his head. None of it was written down. And there were at that time something like 14 or 15 chapters. There were 38 chapters that he had already written. So I will never forget this moment. I asked, so what's in chapter 3? He would tell me. What's in chapter 12? Randomly go through the different chapters in that sequence, and he knew exactly what was in every chapter. That's a brain that I have often joked with him, I want to donate to science. Once, I don't remember when, we decided, I said, well, let's make a list of all the stories that are in your head. I don't remember when this was, 5, 10 years back. We got to like 30 stories. These role-playing games, the Dungeons and Dragon type thing, these tabletop role-playing games, you may know about them, I don't, but he leads 2 of them. 2?
Yeah.
He leads 2. He was leading 3, he leads 2 games. In one of these games, he played, each of the way this works, everybody creates a character, and it's a participatory thing. He was playing 500 characters, at least, and he could tell me about all of them. And they're incredibly creative, kind of mind-blowing. It's not mind-blowing. So the challenge that's what I sort of making a go of writing and making a go of, how do you get that? Maybe there's a scientific component to it, when you study the brain. If we could just have a port and download it, is how do you get that into the world? That was one of my first challenges, so let's give writing a go. So it still kind of blows me away. He remembers things that I wish he would forget about things I said 15, 20 years ago. So amazing memory for that kind of stuff. Terrible memory for what you do today, but that's every child. Everybody who has parents understands that. So that's one thing. So the other thing I want to mention is the issue of what makes it work for people with creative skills who are on the spectrum. What makes it work in terms of creative? Artists, musicians, scientists may be a little different, although I fully recognize it's it's definitely creativity. But when you're in the gig economy, right? When you're a gig, when you're art, music, crafts, things like that, you got to hustle and sell yourself. What makes it work for everybody? For some of my most, the musicians that I follow, is you've got to have a booking agent, right? It doesn't work if you don't have a booking agent. It's absolutely true with people who have executive function issues. How do you find the opportunities to do readings for both? Anlor and I've done this as well. If they had an agent that they could share, right? There's plenty to talk about. There's plenty of places to go, and there's plenty of places to buy books, but even just getting the word out. So the issue of, for all of the creative, and we've been talking about, there's lots of opportunities in libraries, and schools, and community centers, and all, there's all sorts of places. There's enormous talent, but the two greatest challenges are getting it down, fighting the distractions and getting it down, which is real, especially in the world of Facebook and the internet. It's, I can't get off Facebook and Twitter since Comey was fired. I'm obsessed with it myself. I totally understand it, and I see it with him all the time as well. So dealing with the distractions to get it down, but also once it's down, figuring out ways that it absolutely needs external help to be able to get it out of the world.
Let me talk about libraries just a little bit because I have a very loving relationship with them. When I was a student at Berkeley, an undergraduate at Berkeley, one of the perks of being close to a straight-A student there, essentially a straight-A student, was they gave you a Stax pass. And I remember that was an actual incentive for me to do really well. That's because I loved having access to the Stax. Well, Berkeley is a huge library. And of course, it's like a maze down in there. And there's all books from all over time and space, miles of them, with study carrels, where the doctoral students have all their books lined up there. And I just love that. I love the smell of the places. So one of the things I like about libraries, and I don't get the same feeling on the internet. I actually make more interesting accidental discoveries in the stacks of a library than I do on the internet. You never know what they're all discovering that there's always finding some new codex in the Vatican Library that's been lost for 500 years. That kind of thing actually happens in a place like the Berkeley Stacks. So just walking along, a book will catch my eye. This is the kind of thing that fuels the creative mind, is the stuff you find, or the books that some previous reader has left on the study carrel. I've been headed in great directions by that. So this is ways in which libraries have helped me. I would say that if there's one thing I wish libraries could do, it'd be get rid of the paywall on expensive scientific journals. I can't read a lot of great papers that have been funded by public money, mind you. I can't just log in and read them. It costs like $50 or $35 to download a copy of an article that may not actually be relevant to what I'm looking for. So I used to go to I spent a lot, during those 10 years when I was living in the basement closet, which, by the way, I was living on $150 a month that my father sent me in San Francisco. Try that sometime. Anyway, I went going to the medical library there, and they did have terminals where you could get free access to all those papers, which was wonderful. But the problem is that now you have to have special cards. They've put up card access to almost all the libraries, the big libraries like medical libraries and so on, for understandable reasons. But people like me, who was essentially a homeless person living in a closet, that meant no access to this information. So I advocate for some way to get past the paywall on a lot of the publicly funded information. Obviously I have feelings about this, that are out there. Non-bland books. It really distresses me when I walk down the aisles of my local library and I see nothing but bestsellers or kind of what I call bland books. Or let's just say that's the majority of what I see. Now I understand that's what maybe most people want to read, but to me the joy of a library is that you'll find treasures in there. Something unusual, something a little bit out of the ordinary, something maybe a little not acceptable in some way. So that's something I encourage libraries to do, is to keep that up. I know it costs money to buy books, but keep the spicy nuggets going in the library for sure. And of course you are major guardians of free speech. And I really like the way librarians have like buckled down and hunkered down about any incursion on free speech. That's very dear to my heart, and I really appreciate those labors. I just wanted to quickly give you some idea of what I mean when I say out-of-the-box thinking on the spectrum. So I'm going to say I'm going to go into two charged issues. This is right where I do my creative work. One, I'm interested in brains and how they're built over time in a laboratory, during gestation, as a child grows up. All these different ways brains are built. All of them, I'm interested in them. And one of those ways is evolution, speaking as a scientist now. In this room, I'm sure there's some people who are anti-Darwinians or something like that. That's fine. I don't want to try to convince anybody of anything. I want to describe my process. As a scientist, when I look at Darwin's theory of evolution, I see a sound scientific theory, but it's actually, it's weak. The theory itself is very strong, scientifically, where it is strong. But science doesn't stop. It doesn't end. It's not like we come up with a theory and now everything's explained. If you come up with a strong theory, then you move on. Say, okay, where do we go from here? It's like you built the trunk, okay, how do we build the branch now? And that's where, as a scientist, from a scientific point of view, where we are with evolutionary theory. People trying to build branches off a strong trunk. And it involves actually not necessarily building on Darwinian theory. I'm going to talk a little science for you. I'm not going to condescend to you. Sometimes an advance in science isn't actually built on the trunk. For example, if you look at Newton's celestial mechanics, which are still used by spacecraft, navigate. You read the news about the Cassini spacecraft going between the rings of Saturn. That's all Newton. Isaac Newton figured out how to do that stuff. But we also know about atomic theory, which is underneath all the stuff that Isaac Newton studied. The point is that Newtonian celestial mechanics is not built on top of atomic theory. It's like a separate theory. They are compatible. They're consistent with each other, but they don't really talk to each other that much. Well, a little bit. I mean, yes, when it comes to colliding atomic particles, you get the conservation of momentum and mass and so on. But anyway, the point is, though, what guides the Cassini spacecraft does not depend on atomic theory very strongly. And so it is likely to be with what comes after Darwin, what comes in addition to Darwin. The next step in scientific evolutionary theory may not actually be an elaboration of Darwin. Okay. Where this has all led me, and this is where it gets dicey, apart from the fact that already Darwinian evolution is a hot subject for some people, it leads me to this. The problem is that my own work, my own thinking, has led to the understanding that in evolution we're talking about how things become different, how organisms become different from each other. And the problem is that we humans are organisms. And some of that stuff happens with humans too. So you end up in this difficult position of saying that humans are sort of immune to these forces of nature which cause differences to arise between organisms. Or you have to accept that there may be systematic differences between humans. We're moving into the direction of things like racial differences, gender differences. You see how it gets dicey fast. The problem is that the alternative is an end to science in that area. You either chuck the idea of scientific progress out the window and go on with the idea that there are no systematic differences between people, or you face that there may be systematic differences between people and science moves forward. Now, I happen to feel, based on my work, that there are systematic differences between people. No one is globally superior to anybody else. That's not where it leads, in my understanding. Although that's where some people will try to grab ideas and run with them, and that's why it's dicey. The point is that this is an example of the kind of thinking that an autistic mind can move around in, because I'm not daunted by social opprobrium or censure. I will think as clearly as I can about the subjects and follow them where they'll go without we're concerned about, oh, this is a hot button subject